The sun had barely risen, casting soft beams of light through the dense forest canopy. The air was crisp and fresh, filled with the earthy scent of moss, wet soil, and the lingering aroma of pine trees. Birds chirped from the treetops, and the faint rustling of leaves created a tranquil symphony that surrounded the two rangers standing near a weathered signpost reading private property. The sign, though old and slightly faded, stood tall amidst the towering trees, reminding all who passed that the land they were about to tread was off-limits to outsiders. Lily, the younger of the two rangers, took a deep breath and scanned the surroundings. Her sharp eyes always caught the smallest details, an overturned stone, a bent twig, or a trail of footprints. Today, however, the forest felt different. The stillness in the air was unnerving, and she could sense something amiss. She tightened the straps of her backpack, adjusting the gear on her shoulders, feeling the weight of her duty settle in. Jack, her partner, stood beside her. His face, weathered by years of experience in the forest, remained expressionless, but his eyes told a different story. He was alert, taking in every movement, every sound, every shift in the breeze. Jack had been with the forest protection team for over a decade, and the forest had become his second home. He knew its rhythms, its secrets, and its dangers. But today, there was a tension that neither of them could shake. "Anything unusual, Lily?" Jack asked, his voice calm but firm. He had seen enough to know when things didn't feel right. Lily turned towards him, her gaze flicking from the sign to the path ahead. "I don't know, but something feels off. Look at the sign, it's been tampered with. The post is new, but the metal's scratched as if someone tried to remove it." Jack stepped closer to the sign, examining the area around it. His hand grazed the post, and he felt the subtle dissonance in the wood, confirming Lily's suspicion. "This isn't right. It's not just the sign, it's the entire area. Something's been going on here." They had been briefed about the rising number of illegal activities in the area, but they hadn't anticipated this level of disturbance so close to the heart of the forest. The protected land they were patrolling was one of the most pristine and untouched areas of the forest. It was meant to remain untouched, a sanctuary for both wildlife and nature. Any trespassers here were not only breaking the law, but they were also endangering a delicate ecosystem that had thrived for centuries. "Lily, we need to check the perimeter," Jack said, his voice tinged with urgency. "Stay close." With synchronized movements, they both began to trek deeper into the forest. The trees grew denser as they ventured further, their shadows swallowing the light. The path was narrow, covered with thick layers of fallen leaves and branches. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. The usual sounds of forest life seemed to retreat, and all that remained was the faint crunch of their boots on the ground. They were near the old logging trail when Lily suddenly stopped. She pointed to the ground. "Look," she said softly. Jack crouched down beside her, inspecting the marks in the soil. There were large, boot-like impressions scattered across the trail, along with tire tracks that led off the path. These weren't the typical marks left by hikers or campers. These were deliberate, made by someone trying to move quickly and undetected. "These aren't normal," Jack muttered, rubbing his hand over the tracks. "Someone's been through here recently." Lily's brow furrowed as she stood back up, scanning the surrounding area. "They're not supposed to be here. This is private property." Jack nodded. "We're not just dealing with trespassers this time. This is something bigger." The realization hit both of them like a punch to the gut. They had expected the usual cases of poaching or illegal logging, but this was a different level of intrusion. The forest was sacred to them, a place where nature was meant to be left undisturbed. Whoever was behind this didn't care about the law. They cared about profits, power, and exploiting the forest's resources. "We need to be careful," Jack said, standing up and adjusting the rifle slung over his shoulder. "This could be the start of something bigger. Let's move. We need to find out who's behind this, and we need to stop them." Lily nodded, determination in her eyes. She knew that this mission was about more than just protecting land. It was about defending everything the forest represented. It was about the creatures that called it home, the ancient trees that had stood for centuries, and the fragile ecosystem that kept the balance of life intact. Together, they forged ahead, deeper into the heart of the forest. Their steps were quiet but purposeful. Every move was calculated, every sound analyzed. They knew this mission would be dangerous, but they were ready. They had sworn to protect the forest, and they wouldn't let anyone destroy it. The stakes were too high. As they ventured further into the woods, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every rustle in the bushes, every snapping twig, made their hearts race faster. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for the next move. Jack and Lily were on the front lines now. The battle to protect the land they loved had begun. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger, but one thing was certain: there was no turning back. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows through the trees, Lily and Jack pressed on. The forest, once alive with the vibrant chorus of birds and wildlife, now seemed eerily quiet. Only the rustling of leaves beneath their boots and the distant chirp of crickets broke the silence. The deeper they ventured, the more it felt like they were crossing into a forbidden world, one that had been violated by forces unknown. The map in Jack's hand showed that they were nearing the center of the protected zone, the area most likely to harbor illegal activity. The path grew narrower, choked with dense underbrush and brambles, making every step feel like an intrusion into the heart of something sacred. But they were determined, and their resolve only hardened with each step. As they rounded a bend in the trail, the trees parted briefly to reveal a small clearing. In the center of the clearing, partially obscured by the thick underbrush, was a tent. The camouflaged fabric barely peeked through the foliage, blending with the natural surroundings, but its deliberate placement was unmistakable. The forest had its own way of revealing secrets, and this was one of its more obvious ones. Lily motioned for Jack to stop, her hand raised in a quiet gesture of caution. She dropped to one knee and began scanning the ground, her fingers tracing the edges of recent disturbances in the soil. Small, deliberate tracks, too large to be animal prints, led directly toward the tent. "We've got company," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jack crouched beside her, his gaze narrowing as he studied the tracks. They were fresh, still visible despite the morning's rain. The footprints were deep and uneven, suggesting they had been made by someone carrying weight, perhaps hauling equipment or supplies. They were heading in and out of the tent, likely making regular trips. "We need to move in quietly," Jack said. "This could be a major operation. Poachers don't set up camps like this for nothing." They exchanged a glance before slipping off the trail and into the cover of the trees, moving with the practiced stealth that came from years of experience. Every step was measured, every sound minimized. As they approached the tent, the air seemed to grow heavier, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. They positioned themselves behind a cluster of large boulders near the edge of the clearing, hidden from view. Jack peered around the rocks, scanning the camp with his binoculars. The tent was surrounded by scattered equipment, cooking supplies, tools, and even what appeared to be a few crates stacked in a corner. There was no sign of life, but something about the camp felt too well organized to be abandoned. Lily's sharp eyes flicked to a set of footprints leading to the nearby trees. The ground was disturbed here as well, suggesting someone had recently been in the area. She pointed to the footprints, and Jack nodded. "Let's check it out." They crept toward the treeline, where the trail continued into the deeper woods. It didn't take long before they stumbled upon something they hadn't expected: a makeshift lookout post camouflaged with branches and leaves. A high vantage point allowed whoever had built it to keep watch over the camp and the surrounding area. "Someone's been watching us," Jack muttered, his voice low. "They knew we were coming." Lily felt a chill run down her spine. "What does this mean? Who are we dealing with?" Jack turned to her, his expression grim. "It means this is bigger than we thought. We're not just protecting the forest anymore. We're up against an organized group." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps reached their ears, followed by hushed voices. They froze. Through the gaps in the trees, they saw movement. A man emerged from the tent, his back to them. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing the dark, weathered gear typical of those who operated in the shadows of the forest. The man paused at the edge of the clearing, scanning the horizon with a pair of binoculars. Lily's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the tension building, the weight of the moment pressing in on them. She shifted slightly to get a better view, her eyes narrowing as she studied the man. He wasn't alone. Another figure emerged from the tent, a woman this time, dressed in similar gear. They exchanged a few words before moving toward the stacked crates. The woman opened one, revealing an assortment of what looked like animal pelts and rifles. "Poaching," Jack hissed. "They're not just cutting down trees. They're hunting protected wildlife." Lily clenched her fists, her anger rising. This wasn't just illegal logging. It was the heartless exploitation of everything the forest stood for. The wildlife, the trees, the land, all were being desecrated for profit. It made her sick to her stomach. Jack's voice was low and controlled. "We can't take them both down here. We need backup." Lily nodded, but they couldn't stay here for long. They had to act, but they also had to be smart. The danger of getting caught was too great. They had to gather more information, make sure they weren't walking into a trap. They retreated slowly, careful to stay hidden from view. The two figures in the clearing hadn't noticed their presence, but Lily knew it was only a matter of time before they would. They moved back toward the trail, sticking to the shadows, every step echoing the weight of their mission. Once they were a safe distance away, Jack pulled out his radio and whispered into the mic, "This is Ranger Jack. We've found the poacher camp, but there's more going on here than we thought. We need backup ASAP." The response was almost immediate. "Understood, Jack. We'll send a team to your location. Stay put and keep your heads down." Lily exhaled, trying to steady her nerves. This was it. The fight to protect the forest had begun in earnest, and there was no turning back now. She looked at Jack, and for the first time since they'd set foot on this mission, she saw the weight of the responsibility in his eyes. "We're not just stopping poachers, Lily," Jack said quietly. "We're stopping an entire network, and it won't be easy." Lily nodded. "But we'll stop them." They shared a brief look of determination before turning back toward the shadows of the forest. They were no longer just rangers. They were the guardians of this land, and it was time to fight back. The days following their discovery passed in a blur of activity. Jack and Lily spent every moment investigating, gathering intel, and preparing for the confrontation they knew was inevitable. Each passing hour made it clearer that they were up against a well-organized operation, one that involved more than just poachers. It was a network, a criminal syndicate exploiting the land for profit, and they were willing to do whatever it took to protect their illicit activities. Back at the ranger station, Jack and Lily sat across from each other, poring over the maps and notes they had compiled. The flickering glow of a single lamp illuminated the dimly lit room, casting long shadows on the walls. They had called in backup, but the reinforcements were still hours away. Time was not on their side. The poachers knew they were being hunted, and it wouldn't be long before they made a move to cover their tracks or, worse, launch a counterattack. Jack's eyes moved across the map, his finger tracing the known locations of the illegal camps and activity zones. "We've got to take them down before they scatter," he said, his voice low but urgent. "If they get wind of our plan, they'll vanish into the forest, and we'll lose our chance." Lily nodded, her face set in determination. "But we can't do this alone, Jack. We need more than just a handful of rangers. This is bigger than us." "I know," Jack replied, his voice tinged with frustration. "But we can't wait for more help. If we wait, they'll destroy everything." The weight of their decision hung in the air, and neither spoke for a moment. Lily's thoughts raced as she weighed the options. She knew Jack was right. They couldn't afford to wait. The forest, their sanctuary, was under direct threat. And as much as she wanted to call for reinforcements, she understood the urgency of the situation. Every minute they delayed allowed the poachers to get one step ahead. "All right," she said finally, her voice steady but firm. "We'll go in now. But we'll need to be tactical, cut off their escape routes and isolate them. We'll surround the clearing where we found the camp and set up a perimeter. If we can force them into a corner, they'll have nowhere to run." Jack's eyes met hers, and for a moment, they shared a silent understanding. This was a dangerous mission, and neither of them knew what they would face when they stepped back into the forest. But they had made a promise to protect it, and that promise was stronger than any fear they felt. "We're not just protecting the forest anymore," Jack said, his voice resolute. "We're protecting everything that depends on it. The wildlife, the ecosystem, the future of this place. We can't let them win." Lily stood up, her jaw clenched with resolve. "Let's do it." The two rangers gathered their gear, checking each piece of equipment one last time. They double-checked their radios, rifles, and survival kits, ensuring that nothing was left to chance. The forest awaited them, and they knew what was at stake. There would be no second chances. As they stepped out of the ranger station, the cool evening air filled their lungs. The sky above was beginning to darken, the first hints of stars beginning to twinkle through the thinning clouds. It was a peaceful sight, but the serenity of the night felt like a stark contrast to the battle they were about to face. They made their way toward the forest's edge, their movements swift and silent. The path ahead was familiar, but the weight of the mission ahead cast a heavy shadow over everything. When they reached the clearing near the poacher camp, they stopped to assess the situation. Jack pulled out his binoculars and scanned the area. The camp was quiet now, too quiet. The poachers had likely retreated into the woods, sensing the approaching danger. But Jack and Lily weren't fooled. They knew that the poachers had eyes and ears all around the forest. They had to be cautious. Lily moved first, stepping into the brush, her boots barely making a sound on the forest floor. Jack followed close behind, and the two of them melted into the shadows, disappearing into the foliage. The forest had always been their home, and now it was their battlefield. As they crept deeper into the woods, Jack's radio crackled to life. "This is Ranger Team Bravo. We've arrived at the perimeter. We're in position." "Good," Jack responded. "Hold tight. We're going in now." Lily moved forward with a sense of urgency, her heart pounding in her chest. Every instinct told her to be careful, to move slowly, but time was running out. They had to move fast if they were going to catch the poachers before they vanished into the wilderness. Suddenly, a rustling noise from the left. Lily froze. Her hand instinctively went to her rifle, and Jack did the same. They crouched low, blending into the shadows as the noise grew louder. Someone was moving through the underbrush. A figure appeared, a man, his face hidden beneath a hood, carrying a large sack over his shoulder. He paused, looking around cautiously, before continuing deeper into the forest. Jack motioned for Lily to follow, and they moved as one, their steps silent as they closed the distance between them and the poacher. They were close now. Too close. The tension was palpable, and every second felt like an eternity. Jack's voice came through Lily's earpiece, a calm whisper. "We've got them. Get ready." Without warning, the poacher ahead of them turned, spotting the movement. He raised a rifle, but before he could react, Jack was already on him, lunging forward with the speed of a predator. The poacher struggled, but Jack quickly overpowered him, knocking the rifle from his hands and pinning him to the ground. Lily was on alert, watching their surroundings. As Jack subdued the first poacher, she scanned the area, her rifle poised for any threat. But there were no other movements, no signs of other poachers. The sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. More of them were coming. "This is it," Jack said, his voice tense. "They're not going to give up easily." But neither were they. The two rangers stood tall, ready to face whatever came next. The battle had just begun, and the fate of the forest rested in their hands. They would stop at nothing to protect what was theirs. With that, they moved deeper into the forest, the night thick with the promise of the confrontation that would determine the future of the land they had sworn to protect.